everyone, welcome back to Melody's 15 Years. And today we're going to talk about what it's like to be a caregiver when you also need a caregiver. So, welcome back to the podcast, Melody.
Thank you.
So, that's a unique situation to be a caregiver and need a caregiver. Let's dive into that a little bit. Explain a little bit about your situation when you were being a caregiver. Tell us about that.
Well, when I was first diagnosed, I did have basically a caregiver. I had a husband who was somewhat attentive and able to help me out in the very early diagnosis stage. But then um, my mother ended up coming into the picture with dementia. She had been living close to us when I was diagnosed. So I was used to kind of taking care of her, making sure that she was okay. But then as her dementia progressed, she needed more and more care. So I ended up losing my caregiver through a divorce, separation divorce, and became a full-time caregiver of my mother, which was a situation I never really expected to be in. And I tried to be the best I could for her, but I was also needing something that I did not have.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with dementia, because that's a full time, it's like a toddler, it's not
Yep.
just helping, it's like full on caretaking.
Yeah, and she was hospitalized once she had an accident. She fell and broke her pelvic bone. So then she was put into a rehab. So it was back and forth to the rehab. She was in Virginia. I was in North Carolina because she had the fall at your house. Um, so it was a lot of moving pieces, and then bringing her home. It was trying to coordinate everything while still coordinating my routine scans and my care for ocular melanoma and other things, and then also keeping her and her dementia care under control. So there was a lot of moving pieces with that. And she just kept progressing and progressing. And then she ended up getting a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis. So then it was trips to the doctor for that. It was her radiation. It was her um, hospital stays and so on that she needed. So then it became, she was my full-time job, and my care got pushed to the back. And um, I wasn't supported, but I also wasn't able to keep up with my care that I needed because I didn't have anybody to watch her so I could go to the doctor. So it was kind of this real complex situation over the course of off and on, probably 10 years.
It's a long time.
Hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about the kind of unique challenges in that situation that if you're not a caregiver, maybe you wouldn't realize caregivers are going through these things.
So with caregiving, um, it, it can become a full-time job. And I don't think that people who are needing care understand the complexities and how much um, it takes from a caregiver to be able to fulfill that role. And that's the hardest part, is that we really want to make sure that our loved ones are cared for, but it can be so consuming that we lose our own selves in the midst of that. uh, I don't think that the person who needs care actually understands that's what's happening. It just seems to kind of morph that way. And other people that I've talked to that are caregivers, they just seem to take on that role, and the person who needs the care tends to lean so much on the caregiver that the caregiver almost takes on the illness, I guess is a good way to say it. It becomes, instead of your OM, it becomes ROM. If instead of your dementia, it becomes our dementia. If, whatever it is, it becomes consuming to both people because the person probably isn't able to handle the majority of their care.
Yeah, and I mean that's the situation you found yourself in where, she
Hmm.
couldn't do simple things like make herself a snack, bathe
Right.
herself, eventually use the bathroom by herself. Those are, that's why I said it's kind of like a toddler. Like you
Mhm.
had to be there every second to make sure she wasn't hurting herself.
Yeah.
So you definitely would be on the back burner if on a burner at all.
Yeah. For my situation, I kind of tended to get off the burner.
Yeah.
I became, I became so far removed from myself because I was giving her so much of my time and attention that I didn't have time. I was trying to run a caring site. I was taking care of her. I had all these things I had to juggle, and so the easiest thing for me to let go of was my doctor's appointments, my follow-up care, my well-being, basically, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a lot when you have no one else to worry about but yourself. Those are also things that we put off because they're hard or we don't want to. So, especially when you have something that's really an obstacle, it's very easy to put those things off and say, oh, I'll deal with that later.
Right, and at the point where I was at was, I was approaching 5 years when she got to where she really couldn't care for herself. There was a time that she did go back to Arizona, and I was able to kind of take care more of me. But for that was fairly short lived. And then she ended up getting sick in Arizona, and we had to bring her back to North Carolina. And then she was so far progressed at that point that she needed 24-hour care. And you don't think about the little things about you've got to go get a scan. Oh dear, I have to have somebody take care of this person. I have to go get a scan, but now I have to get a scan all by myself, and I didn't have anybody to lean on for my support. And I remember the first time I went for a scan by myself, I was kind of like hit upside the head with this reality. I don't have anybody here to help me in the difficult times. And I just kept thinking, God, I hope none of my scans come out bad. Or what are we going to do? What's going to happen to my mom? And luckily that didn't happen. But those things all start playing in your head because you kind of need your help um, on your own with your own disease, your own ailments. I don't even mean it OM. It could be anything. A lot of caregivers have other illnesses themselves. You tend to just kind of push it aside because it's hard, and you get all consumed in the caregiving of the person.
Definitely. And it's probably like, when they say like the days drag on and the years fly by, like that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but I think it kind of fits this. Like your days are long, they're hard, and you
Yes.
put things off, and then all of a sudden 6 months went by, and you're like, "Oops, I didn't do that scan, or I didn't get to the eye doctor, or I didn't, whatever, whatever." It's
Well,
hard when you're so busy.
it is hard, but it's also, oh shoot, I need a colonoscopy. I need a ride to the colonoscopy. I need somebody to sit there and pick me up. I don't have anybody. There was nobody there that could take me. So my colonoscopy didn't get scheduled on time. Um, I couldn't take her to a mammogram or anything because I couldn't leave her alone in the waiting room. I tried one time and it did not work. She didn't understand that she had to stay in the waiting room, and it was, CAT scans are fairly quick. MRIs take a long time, but I thought she could sit out there and behave, but she wandered and she got in trouble and it didn't work. So I didn't take her with me anymore. But then what happened was that my scans, instead of getting every 6 months, they went to once a year, and then they kind of lingered. Sometimes they were a little over a year because even though I had um, people that could watch her, it was difficult because everybody works during scan times. So if you need to go to the doctor appointment, you have a set period of time that you can go, which is when everybody else is working. So you try to get a neighbor while they're working. You try to get a child or another sibling, which I did not have, but they're working. And so it's just like, it just kind of all falls on you, and you have to be the one to, you know, suck it up and deal with it. And it's not always it's not always easy. You get a lot of, I know with me, I can't speak for everybody, but I have heard from other caregivers that they do develop a lot of resentment because you're trying to do so much with I'm not, this is going to sound terrible, but no appreciation, because there isn't any appreciation. You just do it because you have to do it because it was handed to you and you didn't ask for it, you didn't want it, but there's nobody else to do it. So now here it is and you have to do it. And so you do get a little resentful of it because you lose yourself. You lose your time. You can't go to a movie. You can't go out to dinner with somebody. You lose your friendships because you become so removed from everybody because this one person becomes so much of your primary responsibility.
Yeah. So, for someone who's going into a caretaker role, whether they've been in it a while or maybe they're brand new to it, what are some tips that you could give or some important takeaways that could help them navigate this?
Number one, bring a social worker in. You got to, because they have tools that you don't even know about, you don't think about, or they can help you get tools. I wish I would have brought home health into my mom's care earlier. Um, I think people wait too long to get on palliative care or hospice. Hospice doesn't mean you have a terminal illness, you're going to die tomorrow. My mother actually would have qualified for hospice much earlier than we actually got her on, because with dementia and Alzheimer's, there is a point where it does qualify. When you can get home health, you can at least get an aide to come in and sit for 3 hours, maybe help you with some laundry. There's things that they can do that are helpful, that you can maybe just go outside and take a walk. But try to line up those things because it's very important that you don't let it consume you, thinking that you are the only one, because you really are not. You just don't have the tools yet. And you can find tools. Talk to your doctors, talk to social workers, talk to your insurance company. There are things out there that can help.
Yeah, that's great. What about are there any kind of co-op kind of things where people trade, almost, I'm thinking like babysitting, where you kind of trade with, do they have any kind of networks like that?
There are some communities that have that. There's also some teenagers that look for volunteer hours that will come and sit. And there are also retirees that will come and sit. They're not going to do any big chores for you, but it's that I just need somebody to sit here for 2 hours while I go to the grocery store. Or I got a doctor's appointment. I just need somebody to come sit with them to make sure that they're safe. That there are networks like that. I think American Cancer Society is a good one to reach out to, but the issue is that they tend to be in larger metropolitan areas. Where we lived was more of a rural area, and we did not have any of those groups or plans that could help us with that.
Yeah.
It was easier once I got her on hospice. It was easier. I had a dedicated nurse that came once a week. I had aides that came in 3 times a week. Because you even if they just take over the bathing, I mean, that's huge right there. It's just because that was always a big chore for me, because it's not like you can just put them in the bathtub and be done in 5 minutes. It was this prep for the bath, during the bath, getting out of the bath, and so it was turned out to be hours. So having an aide come by that could do that was very helpful.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's a big lift, for sure. What about some ideas for caregivers not to lose themselves? Can they focus on themselves and maybe not build up some resentment?
I think the best way to not have resentment is to establish boundaries early on. You need to talk to the person that you're caring for, and you need to also talk to their medical team. Because especially for women, we tend to think we have to be the caretaker of the world, and we do not. And it's okay to say no, because most people don't ask you, "Hey, will you be my caretaker?" You just are. It's assumed you're. Oh well, you're you're the spouse, you're the child, you're the next of kin. You have to have this responsibility, and you really don't. Um, the I know when you're looking at your loved one who needs help, it's really hard to say, no, I'm not going to help you. But you can say, I can do this, this, and this for you. What I have seen in my years in this community is that the caretakers take on too much responsibility. They tend to, I don't want to, well, control. They tend to control the situation. And then they get mad when their person relies on them too much. I think it's important to put it back on the person if they're able. In my case, my mom couldn't, but there were some things I could have done differently. And I wish I would have had more boundaries in the beginning and said, these are the things I can do, and this is the things I can't do. And, I need this much time to myself. I think it's very important that you schedule time to yourself to get out of the situation. I think it's very important that cancer, ocular melanoma, doesn't become the main focus of your lives. I think that that's really a dangerous, slippery slope, because that's where I see the most resentment on both sides. Sometimes the patient doesn't want to be told what to do. They don't want the caregiver taking over. And then the caregiver feels, well, I have to do all this stuff and you're doing nothing. And so the conversations that I've heard is like, well, you won't let me. If you would just let me, I would do it myself. But then then the other person comes in and says, well, you don't do it right, so I have to do it. And it gets into this kind of, it's almost like a power struggle, maybe. And so somebody's going to retreat back and somebody's going to go in control. So I think it's a lot of I think it's a lot of conversation so that there's equal parts there, that the person is supported the best that they can be supported without you losing you and without the patient losing them. Because that also is a problem. When you have a caregiver who's overly exuberant and wants to control things, then the patient feels like, well, I don't have a say in my own care or my own life anymore. You're handling everything. So I think boundaries are really a good place to start.
Yeah, and I would probably add, don't be afraid to reevaluate the boundaries if they're not going well, because I can imagine myself, as if I was in a caretaker role, I could imagine that I would overcommit and take on too much because I wanted to be there for my person, show support, I want to help. And then a few months in, I would go, oh, this isn't sustainable. Like I need to change the game. And so I think making it okay to sit down and say, let's reevaluate. Do you really need as much as I'm giving? Is it okay if I back off a little bit? I'm burning out. And be honest, I'm burning out. I need a different direction. I think that's important too.
And I think that there's different levels as we move through our illnesses. Some days we need more help and some days we need less help. And I think that as a caregiver, we have to take those cues from our person, because sometimes our person doesn't want to hurt our feelings. They might, I know in the early days, I wanted to cook. I really did. But I wasn't allowed to cook because, oh, well, you can't see, let me do it. And I know it was out of care, but there were a lot of things that were done for me that I could have done myself. But I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I didn't want to, I didn't want to upset anybody, so I didn't say anything. Then when my separation happened and I did not have a caregiver and I had to do all these things myself, I managed fine. Uh, but it's just kind of this really catch-22 situation you can get yourself in if you're not careful, and it can be bad. And resentments build, and then trouble starts, and then divorces happen, or splits happen, or something happens that because people didn't feel understood or appreciated or taken care of.
You mentioned earlier palliative care. Let's talk about that for a minute because I know there's a lot of questions about what exactly palliative care is. When do you know it's time to bring them in? A lot of people wait too long. What would be a good time to bring them in?
As soon as you feel like you have care that really needs to be managed, if you are having multiple doctor's appointments, if you are having multiple treatments or a very difficult treatment, that would be the time to bring them in because your medical situation has changed and you're going to need medical support. I don't mean hospital or doctor support, but you're going to need some medical support. You're going to need somebody there to help you just to manage things. So if you're metastatic, I would look into getting palliative care pretty soon after I started treatment because some of these treatments are tough. And having a palliative care to help you get through it is a good thing. But I think you should ask that question as, you might have to ask it many times, but ask that question early on in your journey that you would need palliative care for metastatic. For those of us that aren't metastatic, we probably wouldn't qualify for palliative care because once we have our radiation, yes, we have issues and we have a hard time doing things, but at the same time, we're not medically needy. So I think you have to have a medical need to start palliative care. But for me, if I was metastatic, as soon as I started taking treatments for metastatic disease, I would get palliative care right away.
And can you give kind of a nutshell version of what palliative care is if someone's like, ooh, that sounds scary. Sounds like
So
hospice.
palliative care is not hospice. Hospice is something totally different. You don't have to be in a life-ending situation. You just need support. They can help you with managing your pain. They can help manage your med. They're a good bridge between you and your physician team. They offer support. They can help you kind of coordinate some in-home care if it's necessary or if you think it would be helpful. So they can help coordinate the caregiving part that might be too much for your person. I know there are some diseases that you're sent home and you have to give the infusions yourself. And it's like, well, I'm not a nurse. How can I give my loved one an infusion? I don't know the first thing about this. Having palliative care come in would be helpful because they can kind of lean on you, or I'm sorry, you can lean on them and they can help support you that way. So always ask if you think that it is of benefit to you, ask as soon as you can. If you don't qualify, they'll let you know when you do qualify and you just keep asking for it until you get to a point where they say, yes, we can come in now.
And they help with other things with the family, not just the patient as well, right?
Yeah. They're this is not a good explanation of them, but they're almost like the coordinator. If you look like the center of the wheel, they're in the middle and they kind of can have all these little fingers that can reach out to help kind of coordinate so that the wheel moves more smoothly.
Yeah. So even if you as the patient are thinking, I can do this, I've got my caregiver, I'm okay, but maybe you have kids in the picture, palliative care can come in and help with, making sure the kids have things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can do so much, and if they don't know what to do, they can find out how to help you, or they can bring in a social worker to help you. But I think I just spoke to a lady that's a social worker about um, doing a podcast. She was a volunteer for us at one of the 5Ks. And so we got started talking about social workers and what they do. And people have this odd idea of what a social worker is. You don't need to be in foster care or CPS or in danger to get a social worker. A social worker has this vast knowledge of the community around you, and they can help guide you to services that are out there that you don't even know are there. Um, I just talked to one patient who found that their hospital offers rides to and from treatment. They didn't know that until they contacted the social worker. The social worker set it all up. Now they don't have to worry about how am I going to get back and forth to my doctor's appointments, to my treatments, to my radiation, my infusions. They had a shuttle van that just picks them up, takes them to their treatment, picks them up after the treatment, takes them back home. Now he doesn't have to worry about driving. He doesn't have to worry about getting somebody to drive him. Everything is now taken care of. And that is the beauty of working with a social worker and a palliative care team. They kind of take a lot of the pressure off of the caregiver and of the patient.
Yeah, and we just did an episode with a social worker not too long ago. Molly Vicino, I believe, was her name. So check out that. I can link it in the show notes as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that was my situation too. Like when I heard social worker, I think children in foster care that are being abused. And, you don't want a social worker in your house because it means you have problems going on. But this is a completely different situation. They're different kinds of social workers. They don't work with abused children, they work with cancer patients, and they know exactly what resources are available to you and how to get them. And they have networks with other social workers. So even if you are asking for something that maybe they don't know, they can reach out to their network and find it for you. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, this person I was talking to, she's a social worker in transplant, which is completely different than cancer. But she says, well, if I don't know the answer, I know who to call to get the answer. Because, they have this vast network. And it kind of goes that old saying, you don't know till you know. You don't know till you know. And if you don't ask, you're never going to know. So ask. That's probably my biggest takeaway. Ask everybody and anybody for anything. Don't be afraid to say, I need help. How can I get this help? Is there a social worker? Is there a palliative care team? Who can I talk to get help? Because the last person to offer help is usually your physician, because they're not thinking about that. They're very narrow-minded about your own health. They don't ask, hey, caregiver, how you doing? You handling this okay? No. They just assume that you are. And if you're not, then, oh well, they can't help you with that because that's not their wheelhouse.
Absolutely. So to wrap up this episode, what's like a final takeaway that you want to leave the caregivers with?
For the caregivers, don't lose yourself. Don't take on more than you can handle. Don't be afraid to say no. That's probably the biggest thing. Don't be afraid to say no or not at this time. I can't help you at this time. I can help you at this time. I'm available Wednesday at 4 if I can help you then. It's okay to schedule because you can get in real deep real fast. And then nobody asks you to be the caregiver. You just get that handed to you. For those people that don't have a caretaker and are a caregiver to somebody else, whether it's a parent, a child, a spouse, when you need care for yourself, that's a real important thing is don't forget to take care of your own self. Make sure that you are keeping up with your medical appointments. Make sure that you ask for help yourself. And it's okay for you to get somebody to kind of be your caregiver because you can't do everything. It's just impossible.
Absolutely. And take advantage of those resources, the social workers and the palliative care and any resources in your community. Like we were talking about, if you can find maybe a Facebook group or something where people are connecting, even if it's just for support. So look for those resources. Check out our website, acureinsight.org. We have a lot of resources on our website as well, including our Tuesday night Zoom group. If you just need a little more support, that's for patients. And there is a Facebook group for the families, correct?
Yeah, there's Ocular Melanoma Community is probably the better one that is monitored and safe, and they don't have bots, and they don't allow spam and that sort of stuff. But Ocular Melanoma Community is for family and friends and community members that are not necessarily patients. Well, there are patients in there, but it wasn't designed to be the patient advisory group.
Right. So find resources, reach out. If you need help, you can reach out to us as well. Any of our email addresses are just our first names at acureinsight.org. I hope everyone has a wonderful, safe week. We'll see you guys next time.